Hey everybody, it's Chuck Dixon here to answer questions about what it is that I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Lucky, lucky, lucky me. Lifelong dream fulfilled. Um, as always, if you could help me out by passing these around, sharing them on social media or wherever you go on the internet. If you know any of your fellow fans that would like to have access to a actual working comic book writer who's willing to answer any and all of their questions, yeah, they probably want to know that. I'd want to know that. So thank you for sharing. To all of you who shared, numbers have gone up significantly in the last few weeks, and I appreciate that because I want to keep doing these, but I need a reason to, and that means eyeballs. If there's people watching them, I'll keep doing them. And the more people that watch, well, the more incentive I have to keep doing them. It's as simple as that. It's just simple economics. In this case, economics of time. All right, first question. Um, RB Probe says that Drew Geraci has inspired him. Oh, okay. Uh, so here's my new question for Chuck's next Ask Chuck Dixon video. Who are your favorite TVPIs, private detectives? Okay. It's off the topic of comics, but as all know, I have many, many areas of interest. And like everyone else, one of them is TV. Monk. Monk would be my favorite private detective. He's kind of a consultant to the police department. Monk is my second favorite television show of all time, and the writing is brilliant, uh, and everything works about it. It's character and plot driven at the same time. The writing on it is consistently brilliant. Um, the character of Monk is as complex, possibly even more complex than Sherlock Holmes. He's a continuous well of surprises while remaining consistent to a character afflicted with near crippling OCD. And the other beauty of this is a brilliant supporting cast uh, that are also funny and consistent. And the show has heart as well. We care about the emotional well-being of Monk and the various characters without it ever getting angsty or depressing or dark. And the other thing that I love about the show is the mysteries work. The mysteries are the best mysteries ever put on television. They're they're clever and different, and they work. And they keep you guessing. I think I've watched the entire series 5 times, and there are still episodes that I can't remember how it worked out. And it's like watching it for the first time. That's a good mystery. That's a good mystery. And also the way they get Monk into stories is never, it's never the consistent private eye plot line of the client coming and he takes on the client. The client's been lying to him. The standard plot line stolen from the Maltese Falcon again and again and again. Monk never goes there. Monk always has a different way into the story, which brings me to my second favorite television private eye, Jim Rockford. Jim Rockford, you know, it. This is a cool series because it kind of evolves. Um, NBC wanted a new series from James Garner, but they didn't want his James Garner persona, you know, the kind of affable, cynical, skeptical guy who would rather avoid a fight than be in one. So in the initial season, he's a tough guy, and Garner and Stephen Cannell and the other creators on the show knew that this was just to um, assuage NBC's desire for Garner as a tough guy, and they eventually evolved him by the second season into what we know as the James Garner character we all know and love. And as I said with Monk, they always found inventive ways into stories, and this is ground broken first by Rockford Files. Again, Rockford wasn't your typical private eye sitting in his office waiting until some woman in trouble wanders in to hand a case to him. Rockford would run into trouble. His stories might start at the DMV. and just grow from there. Natural, organic storytelling with a crew of fantastic writers. Some of them were old Hollywood hands, and then some of them were new guys like David Castle, who would go on to create The Sopranos. So, and again, another show with a terrific supporting cast. The fact I love the fact that Rockford's dad is in the picture, Noah Beery Jr., and Rockford has some friends in the police force, but not many. That's a typical private eye trope, but they play it really well on the show, really cleverly. Um, yeah, this is classic stuff. It's classic private eye, but it's always told in a unusual, unconventional manner, and they don't leave the humor behind, which is what I like about the show. Just a bunch of lovable characters and good stories, workable mysteries, workable action stories, and lots of car chases because, as James Garner admitted in his biography, they didn't allow a lot of killing and violence in the 70s on TV, so you had to replace that with cars screeching around empty lots. So there you go. Another great television private eye is Jack Irish. Jack Irish is an Australian show, and it's a series of TV movies and miniseries, and I think one of the streaming services carries them all, maybe Amazon. Guy Pearce he's not really a private eye. He's a lawyer whose wife has been murdered, and he sort of becomes an alcoholic mess. And rather than be a private eye who takes clients, um, he 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 works as kind of a hired rent-a-thug or enforcer, and not a very effective one because Guy Pearce isn't a tough guy. He's a little guy, and his character Jack Irish isn't. He's tough in spirit, but not physically. But he works for a gambler to work off his debts, and that often brings him into partnership with Aaron Peterson, who is the muscle for the gambler. And Aaron Peterson is just one of my favorite actors, favorite guys working currently, and a real tough guy. And the so Jack Irish, his stories usually involve him working for his gambler boss, the guy he owes the money to, and at the same time doing favors for friends. A lot of times it starts out as legal work and turns into investigation. And for some reason in Australia, they do a lot of stories about conspiracies, and no one really does them better. The Australians apparently love stories about the conspiracies, military industrial complex and government experience, conspiracies, and white collar crime and things like that. And that's a lot of what Jack Irish becomes involved with. Cases with human trafficking and drugs, uh, and you really fear for the guy because he seems like a normal guy. Like I said, he's not a tough guy. Jack Irish is not going to fight his way out of any situation. He's usually overpowered or taken prisoner, or it just looks like the end for him. I think he's been on more quote unquote last rides than any other private detective character I've ever seen. But the stories are fun, believable. Again, there's a great supporting cast, and there's quite a bit of humor, and unusual for a private detective. His Jack Irish's love life is almost as interesting as the mystery stories. So good procedural stuff. My other favorite private detectives, I really like Psych, um, and Psych kind of breaks away from what I like about the other series. It's a send up of the private eye genre. It's basically, two guys who were inspired by television to become detectives, and they just never grow up. I mean, they're approaching 40 now, and they just still act like, you know, kids. Um, and that's what's fun about the show. The mysteries generally don't work; they're very contrived. But this show I watch, it's almost parody, and again, a great cast, and most of the emphasis is on humor. And this cast has a chemistry unlike any other television show I've ever seen. Um, these people really seem to love working together, and it comes across, and you kind of join in on the fun. But there you go. There are my four favorite private eye detectives on television, detective shows. Aaron Joshua Jesutis, boy, I hope I pronounced that right. Hey, Chuck, a classic question. Why do most superheroes have their parents killed in their origins? Well, I'm no subscriber to the Joseph Campbell theory of literature, but orphans seem to have a kind of an attraction. And orphans are threshold characters. They're characters that started out life normally as a child with two parents, and they kind of, get separated, usually by death, and sets them on the course of their life. So you don't have, they're loners, they're underdogs, they've got a lot to overcome. Um, they generally start out friendless and alone. And that's a good place to be for any hero of any story, is friendless and alone, with challenges to overcome. So Romulus and Remus, they're the earliest classic orphan characters I can think of. I guess Moses counts, right? Uh, so as an orphan. Um, but I'm talking about fiction. So, when you move on to Dickens, I mean, Dickens basically made his livelihood writing about orphans. Orphans play a big part in his story because, parentless children were a huge problem in Victorian England, as well as, lots and lots of other problems. But, characters like David Copperfield and Oliver Twist are all, start out life with not knowing about their parentage, alone, underdogs, cast into a world of poverty and oppression and abuse. And, we want to see them achieve. We're cheering for them. Everybody's cheering for the orphan. They got their back to the wall. They got, like I said, they're alone and friendless, the ultimate underdog. Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, even though Huck Finn had a dad, what the heck? Not really. And, you know, again, Mark Twain taps into something that everyone saw. I mean, everybody had orphans in their town. They had kids without fathers, without mothers, that either were taken care of or not taken care of. So everybody understood the plight of a child with no parents, no support. And we move on to the classic characters. I mean, Tarzan is a classic orphan. Superman as well. Batman, Spider-Man. These are orphan characters. Alone in the world. That also makes it easier to write them, doesn't it? I'll explain more on that in a little bit. Harry Potter. You know, I had our kids were in a private school for a little while, and I had an argument with the principal because they had banned Harry Potter. And I was no big, huge proponent of Harry Potter, but I like the idea that Harry Potter, um, enticed kids to read. That Harry Potter was a fad. It was a thing, and kids wanted to read. And here the school had said, no, there's no Harry Potter. The kids aren't allowed to bring Harry Potter to school. And I said to the principal, well, why not? Why can't they read Harry Potter? And I suspected it was about the magic stuff. And but it wasn't. She said, we don't like it because of his violent origin. His parents are murdered. And I said, well, you're going to have to cut out an awful lot of fiction. And I listed some of the things I talked about earlier. I said, it's a common trope in fiction that the lead character is an orphan. So, I mean, what's the problem here? But as usual, I never could get anybody at that school to budge on issues like that. And that's why my kids only went there for a little while. So, now on the subject of orphans and things like that, when I was writing Tim Drake Robin, and I was writing Tim Drake Robin for, a long time, at every Bat Summit, at every meeting, it would be brought up what to do about Tim Drake's father, because Tim Drake had a dad and he lived with him. And everybody would argue, the editors and the other writers, for getting rid of Tim Drake's dad. And they wouldn't even ask me, because I was kind of running the show on Robin. I was the Robin guy. They would just say, when are you going to kill Tim Drake's dad? Or how are we going to kill Jack Drake? And I would always say, I have no plans to kill Jack Drake because he's the only character in the Batman universe, the Batman family, who still has a working alter ego. Bruce Wayne, yeah, he's got a secret identity, but nobody really suspects Bruce Wayne as Batman. And Bruce Wayne doesn't have to answer to anybody. I mean, Bruce Wayne doesn't have to sneak out of the house to be Batman. He just has to go to the basement. But Tim Drake did. Tim Drake was, had a dad. He was at school. He had a schedule. He had places he was supposed to be. And here he is disappearing in the night, to go play dress up. And he had to explain these things. He had to explain his absences. He had to explain why he was so tired. He had to explain bruises, things like that. And to me, that all created story. To my editors, they thought it was just a simple, unnecessary complication to the story. And I didn't see it that way at all. They thought the stories would be better if Tim Drake was free to do with his time as he would. And I said, no, it's not, because it's not relatable. Anybody reading this book knew that as a teenager, they had to account for where they were all the time. And to not have Tim Drake account to anybody makes the stories less interesting, not more. And I like the added complications of suspense. Yeah, it's harder to write, but that's what I was getting paid for, do the heavy lifting. It's harder to write a good story than it is to write a bad one. So, it's harder to keep the reader's interest than to say, to heck with it. So there you go. Orphans. Love them. Jay Donner says favorite character in Barney Miller. Yes, this one's out of left field, but yeah, without a doubt, Dietrich. Dietrich kind of, I don't know, he kind of reminded me of me, the annoying nerd. He wasn't Mr. Know-It-All, but he was Mr. Know-A-Lot, and he would interject uh, his little bon mots, his sobering thoughts, his sometimes non sequitur factoids into the story, and I just love the dry delivery. Uh, you know, just a terrific character. He was added to the cast later in the series, maybe I think second season, and for me a welcome addition. But my other favorite character on there was Yamana. I love Jack Sue. Jack Sue is such a terrific actor. He was so funny, so dry, so perfect for this show because so much of the delivery was dry humor. And I like Jack Sue. And when I was a little kid, he was on a show with um, yeah, Tony Franciosa called Valentine's Day, and it was a short-lived show. I think it only lasted like half a season, but Tony Franciosa was one of those, tough guy reporters that only exist in fiction. He's always getting in fist fights and always sticking his nose where it didn't belong and all this. And Jack Sue was his buddy, his man Friday. And Jack Sue's reaction to everything Tony Franciosa did cracked me up when I was a kid. And I thought he was the coolest guy on TV. I loved the way he dressed. I loved the way he talked. And I love the way he answered back to Tony Franciosa, even though Franciosa was his boss. And Franciosa would either not pay any attention to what Jack Sue said or, just let him get away with it. But just a terrific character actor. So there you go. That's Barney Miller for me. JDC. His question is, as a writer, do you subscribe to Joseph Campbell's Monomyth plotting theory? Oh, Joseph Campbell. Mythology. The power of myth. Joseph Campbell is a guy that became famous for writing a whole bunch of books saying basically there's only one story, that our brains are hardwired through history to hear only one story. And every story ever written is a variation of that one story. And to that, I say bullcrap. But unfortunately, you've got people who subscribe to this theory. And so they don't think there's any true inventiveness. There's no new plot lines. So they just trot out the same old crap over and over and over again. And consequently, there's zero surprises in their work. It all seems kind of tired and trite because it is tired and trite because we've seen it all before. And then they don't think that it's possible to create anything we haven't seen before, that there's nothing new under the sun, as really, really lazy writers will inform me. And I say crap to that because, new plot lines come up all the time. Why limit yourself? Why admit defeat? And I don't admit defeat. There's still plenty of great material, great, surprising, unconventional type of storytelling out there. And but people who subscribe to the power of myth and the hero's journey think that you know, writing fiction is just, you know, picking pieces out, you know, and putting them in a row, uh, you know, putting the characters through their paces, just taking tropes like a out of a Whitman sampler and creating a story out of them. And I don't believe that. They even break it down to something that looks suspicious like math. I mean, look at this. This is the monomyth. Monomyth. There's only one myth. There's only one story. You can never tell a different story. As if all of the world's cultures, if the entire human race were pre-programmed to hear only one story. And here they break it down into you know, whatever the hell it's supposed to be, some sort of pie chart diagram. I mean, come on. Writing is about daydreaming. And then there's the archetypes. You know, they've got, you know, one after the other of characters that are used over and over and over again. You know, and they're just types. You know, and I'm having fun imagining Joseph Campbell Devotees trying to guess or trying to assign types to the images here. But so, you know, it explains why so much of movies and television and all the rest of it is boring. Is boring. There's a screenwriter, was a screenwriter, Larry Cohen, and Larry Cohen wrote everything. He wrote westerns, he wrote black exploitation, he wrote thrillers, you know, he wrote television, he wrote movies. And Larry Cohen wrote an essay in the early 2000s, I believe it was, about how he would never discuss a work in progress with any producers because they would begin adding their 2 cents. And their 2 cents was usually derived from, guess what, Joseph Campbell, because they thought they knew how to write a story because they thought there was only one story. There was a template, there was a format. And Larry Cohen, you know, he railed against this whole concept. And so he wrote in this essay that he would never hand in anything but a completed screenplay. And he said, because if you went through the usual vetting process of a treatment and meetings and discussions, the producers would suck all of the surprise and nuance out of anything you wrote. So you were left with, you know, oatmeal at the end. And his advice was, you know, to throw all that crap out. There's no template. There's no formula. Just write what you can to engage the audience in every scene, and throw in plenty of twists and surprises and unconventional storytelling. And Larry Cohen was the anti Joseph Campbell to my mind because he's the only writer I've ever read that's written about this. And it is to be resisted, not engaged with. Fight the power. Fight the power of myth. If you want more on this, I have an upcoming video on Unauthorized TV that goes way deeper into this subject, but not here because this is a short format YouTube thing. Okay, Chuck Johnson. I know you're a comic fan. Can you actually enjoy reading a comic book today, or does your experience in the field get in the way? In other words, do you get so caught up with being impressed or unimpressed with the technical details you can't enjoy a good comic book story? Yeah, there's a lot of crappy comics out now, but there's always been a lot of crappy comics. You know, 90% of all comics are generally crappy comics. But but today's crappy comics are crappy in a way that no other comics have ever been crappy. There's like there's no craft. A lot of times the creators they're not schooled in comics. They weren't mentored by anybody. They reject anybody telling them what to do because they know it all. Because, you know, after all, they're not comic book writers. They're novelists or screenplay writers. And God knows where they get the artists. I think they go to the art supply store and just hire the first 5 people in line at the register. Um, it so it you know, yeah, I can't read most modern comics because they drive me nuts. They're poorly told, poorly written, not engaging. The list goes on and on and on and on. So I rarely read current comic books, but um, Alliance Comics, which are only available at Walmart and online at Walmart, have what, for my money, is the best American comic in decades, Nora's Saga. I've only read the first issue, and I'm blown away. I can't wait for the next one. artwork, story, everything comes together in this. It's just brilliantly told. It's inventive. The imagery is amazing. The story, I don't know where the story's going. And that's always cool when you don't know where the story's going. I don't even really know what the series is about, but I'm engaged because this team of artists and writers have created something very, very special here. And it feels kind of personal. And it's also universally appealing. I mean, you can give this as an all ages comic, you can give it to anybody, and they're going to be drawn in. The Alliance comics guys, Alliance or Allegiance, anyway, they're at Walmart. They're doing something different here, distribution wise, format wise, all the rest of it. And this, they do 4 excellent comics, but this is by far the best of the 4 and the best thing currently published in the United States. Now, I don't mean to be some kind of big comic book snob, but most of the comics I look at are from overseas. Most of the current comics that I look at are from overseas. And I really like this French comic called Eagles of Rome. And it's just a, big sword and sandal epic, lots of action, meticulously researched, lots of eye candy and a good story. I don't read French, so I don't really understand the finer nuances of the story. But these are good comics. You don't really need to be able to read the words to understand what's going on, because most foreign comics are far more visually driven than American comics. It's like they took our art form and did more with it than we've done recently. They embrace the medium in a way that most American creators don't these days. Not all American creators, but the ones currently favored by the major publisher for the most part. Another French comic I love is Sauvage. It's set during the French imperial period in Mexico. And I love anything about any period stuff about Mexico. I just love. And again, a meticulously researched, action-packed story that, I really don't need to be able to read the language. Yeah, I don't understand what's going on some of the pages, but I kind of figure it out. But I get the overall gist of it all, and it's just a marvel to look at for me. And it is good stuff. Um, I also have different artists that I follow. Everybody's done that if they're a comic fan. And my current favorite is this guy Olivier Schwartz. I think he's a Belgian, and he works on a lot of European properties, French and Belgian properties. And I just love his style. This guy is such a terrific draftsman, such an awesome cartoonist, excellent storyteller, and he's a guy I can, I really don't need to be able to read the French. I really can follow these stories with, you know, some degree of understanding, or a greater degree, I should say, than a lot of other French comics. And try as I might, I really can't pick up a lot of French. As many as many of these different volumes as I've read, I it's a weird language. It never sounds like it's spelt. Phonics is not at all ever going to take hold in France. Another foreign comic I like, it's a manga. I don't read a lot of manga, but boy, I like this Vinland Saga. It's really unusual. It's a Japanese comic about the Viking Age in England. It covers a lot of the same grounds as the TV show The Vikings and Last Kingdom, but it's again, meticulously researched, tons of really, really brutal, bloody action. I think it's up to like 12 volumes, 12 hardcover volumes, big, thick, and it's a good read. Each one really does come off as a complete novel, and it's like I said, it's unusual for a Japanese publisher to be interested in so European a storyline, but they do their homework and it looks good and it reads good and it seems very authentic to me. So for American comics, I've been reading a lot of Bob Hope. Bob Hope comics. Chris Duffy years ago turned me on to the cartoonist Owen Fitzgerald. Owen Fitzgerald, he drew Dennis the Menace when I was a kid, but before I was born, he was drawing Bob Hope comics. He drew Bob Hope for years, And I enjoy these because I like seeing how the writer. Well, first I like seeing Owen Fitzgerald's work anytime, and I also enjoy seeing the writers come up to the challenge of basically writing a Bob Hope movie every month. Um, my hat is off to them because these are 32-page stories, all one story, and Hope gets off a quip in every panel. That's like a couple of hundred Bob Hope quips. That's heavy lifting for a writer, and they are funny. I enjoy them. So anyway, there you go. That's what I'm reading. Matthew Lyon says, "What's the most fun you've ever had on a book?" I discussed this in the last segment, but Tex Willer. Tex Willer is the most fun I ever had because it's a Western, which I love, and I love the format. The format allows you, because these stories are lengthy, they have a lot of pages. They allow you room to let the story breathe. Westerns are about panoramas and scale and time and distance, and you can't tell them claustrophobically in tiny little panels and in a short format. And it's one of the reasons I like text. I mean, it allows for like a sequence like this with no words. It's just text going from point A to point B for an entire page, and I love that kind of stuff. And working with the artists in Italy was a thrill because they know their stuff. Um, they understand the Western genre. So another fun thing I worked on recently was Expendables Go to Hell. It's a it's still on Indiegogo if you want to get yourself a copy, but it's a graphic novel. It's plotted by Sylvester Stallone and myself, with artwork by Graham Nolan and Butch Geis. We've got covers by Dave Dorman and Billy Tucci, and it's a big old, I think, a near 100-page graphic novel. When the Expendables literally go to hell and fight Satan, what would not be fun about writing that? Back in the majors, DC and Marvel, the most fun I had was Detective Annual #7, which was an Elseworlds annual, which had Batman as a pirate, Captain Leatherwing, and that was fun to write, partly because Kike Alcatena was in the art. Look at this. I mean, it's Howard Pyle. He's doing Howard Pyle, classic pirate illustrations, but also the fun of writing a swashbuckler with Batman, the total freedom of that. I did the Detective Annual #7, and then in an issue of Batman Chronicles, I did a 10-page follow-up. It was 10 pages of splash pages written in pirate verse, featuring Batman versus the Penguin on the high seas, and that was a lot of fun. The Penguin was not the Penguin; he was Admiral Cobblepot, but he was obviously the Penguin. So, yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I have fun all the time. I mean, this isn't a job for me. Writing comics is not a job. It's like a hobby I get paid to do. It's fun all the time. I enjoy every single moment of writing comics, even when it's challenging, even when it's tough, even when there's reversals of fortune. It's all part of the game, and I love it, and I can't get away from it. And the weird thing is, when I first started writing comics, I was concerned about burnout. And it's not anything that concerns me anymore because as I get older and I actually want to write more, it's actually a compulsion. I don't sense burnout at all. I'm, you know, so so there you go. A little more than you asked, but that's what you get here. You get bargain. You get quantity and quality here at Ask Chuck Dixon. As another example of that, Russ Maharis says, "What was the first comic book you remember reading?" Well, back when I was a kid, comics, like I said before, were everywhere. Uh, no, I wasn't a kid in this period. This is a little bit before my time, but I like this picture. Um, and you would find comics where you could find them. And one of the earliest I remember is this giant Batman annual. It's the first Batman annual, and where I found it was at the junkyard. My dad worked at a place that used to end up with a lot of scrap metal at the end of the week. And on a lot of Saturdays, he and I would drive down into the junkyard in Philly, and he would drop off scrap metal and get paid for it by the pound. And the junk dealer there, a really nice guy, he knew that I liked comic books. And he would say, hey, if you want some comic books, we've got some, because they pulped paper too. And there would literally be mountains of comic books. Yeah, I know. If you're a geek or a nerd, you're like hopping up and down right now. But there would be just piles of comic books, sometimes barrels of comic books. And he would say, yeah, take a few, take as many as you want. My dad would every single time say, don't take too many. Basically, don't be greedy. Because I would have walked out. My dad knew me. I would have walked out with an armload. You wouldn't have been able to see my face. I would have had a stack, 5 feet high. So, and this is one of the ones I pulled out of that barrel. And I read this comic over and over and over and over again. And loved every minute of it. I think the earliest comic I remember, though, is this, not this particular issue, but this issue of Tales of Suspense, which we bought at a, boy, this is boring, isn't it? Listen to that. And I bought the comic book here, and I had a corn dog. Anyway, I bought this at a farmer's market with the top of the cover ripped off. That's what news dealers would do. They would tear off the top of the cover, get the credit for the return, but then sell a comic anyway for, a nickel or whatever. And I got this, and what 4-year-old wouldn't be engaged with this cover? I mean, that's a super creepy, scary cover, and I always remembered it. And it didn't really fuel nightmares or anything else. I was just fascinated with the idea of this enormous amoeba, squid, whatever type thing. It was so freaking huge. And he's in a castle, and everybody's afraid of him. I mean, this imagery is like computer program for an imaginative 4-year-old to be engaged by. And I just always remembered this story. I mean, and, why would I not? So, and the other thing about this Batman annual is it was my first exposure to the strange costumes of the Batman, which, if you watch these segments is a story I talk about all the time. The strange costumes of the Batman, which is a Robin-centric story, and inspired a lot of my work. And I can't tell you how many times I read that story. I just love that story, and I've adapted it, homaged it, stolen it, whatever you want to say, multiple times in my career, because it's a sturdy plot line that's a lot of fun. All right. As I've said before, Unauthorized TV, it's a subscription service. You got to pay per month. There's a lot of great channels there. Funny stuff, instructive stuff, but I got a channel of my own in which I talk about comics like I do here, but in much greater depth. Most of the videos are on one subject only, and I go into quite a bit of depth on comic book storytelling, history of comics, what it's like to work in the industry, stories, early stories from my career, things like that, to keep you entertained, to keep you amused. You can listen to them while you're doing something important. More important, I should say. So anyway, that's it. That's my commercial. That's my video. Keep sharing. Keep letting others know that these are out here, so I can keep doing them for free on YouTube, in addition to doing the pay ones on Unauthorized TV. And I thank you for your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all down the road.